Now that you have focused on delivering outcomes in the real world, you need the core concepts that make your architecture language precise and your decisions defensible. When leaders ask you to justify a roadmap, when delivery teams ask you what to prioritize, and when governance asks you what standards matter, you cannot rely on vague words. You need clear concepts like enterprise, architecture, value streams, and capabilities because these become the foundation for how you define scope, align stakeholders, and design change that actually sticks. TOGAF 10 treats these concepts as essential because without them, enterprise architecture becomes opinion, and opinion does not scale across an organization. Building on the need for precision, the first concept you must get right is the enterprise. In TOGAF 10, enterprise is not just a company name or an organization chart. It is the full context that you are architecting for, including people, processes, information, technology, partners, and governance. Your enterprise might be a whole organization, a group of agencies, a business unit, or even an ecosystem involving vendors and regulators, as long as it is a coherent scope for decision making. This matters because if you define the enterprise too narrowly, you create solutions that optimize locally and break globally. If you define it too broadly, you create architecture that is too abstract to execute. As an enterprise architect, your leadership begins with defining the enterprise boundary in a way that matches the decisions you are accountable for. With the enterprise defined, you need to control the boundary because architecture fails when scope is undefined. The boundary is the line that says what is inside your responsibility and what is outside, while still acknowledging dependencies beyond your control. In real projects, boundaries show up in questions like, are you designing for one business unit or the whole organization? Are you responsible for partners and shared platforms? And who owns the customer journey end to end? When you define boundaries well, you can create governance that is fair and workable because teams know which standards apply and when exceptions are legitimate. When you define boundaries poorly, governance becomes conflict because everyone argues whether something is in scope. TOGAF 10 pushes you to treat enterprise boundary definition as a leadership decision, not an afterthought. Now that you know what you are architecting for, you need clarity on what architecture actually is. Architecture is not a diagram. It is the structure and behavior of the enterprise described in a way that enables change. It explains how the parts fit together and how they work together to deliver outcomes. For you as a leader, architecture becomes a tool for decision making because it reveals dependencies, constraints, risks, and design choices. It helps you answer questions like what must be standardized, what can be flexible, what will become expensive later, and what will create operational risk. This is why TOGAF 10 treats architecture as a means to guide change, because your enterprise is not standing still, and architecture exists to help you change it safely and purposefully. With that definition in mind, it helps to view architecture through three lenses that match real leadership work. Architecture as structure helps you describe how the enterprise is organized, such as platforms, shared services, integration patterns, and governance. Architecture as decisions helps you make and record the choices that shape the future, such as which platform becomes strategic and which patterns become standard. Architecture as guardrails helps you set boundaries that allow teams to move fast without creating long-term damage, such as security controls, interoperability rules, and operational requirements. When you communicate architecture through these lenses, people stop seeing you as a diagram creator and start seeing you as a leader who reduces confusion and enables coordinated execution. Now that you can describe architecture in a leadership way, you should understand why these core concepts protect you. In enterprise environments, accountability is not optional. When something goes wrong, Leaders ask what decision was made, who approved it, and what standard was supposed to apply. If you do not have clear concepts, your governance becomes inconsistent and hard to defend. If you do have clear concepts, you can show that decisions were made within a defined enterprise scope, aligned to a target architecture direction, and governed using agreed criteria. This is how TOGAF 10 helps you operate with confidence. It gives you a shared language to define what you are responsible for, why you are making choices, and how those choices connect to enterprise outcomes. With governance and accountability in mind, you need to define value because leaders care about value before they care about architecture. Value is not only revenue, it is any measurable benefit that matters to the enterprise, such as faster service delivery, reduced operating cost, improved customer experience, improved safety, stronger compliance, or reduced risk. When you design architecture without value clarity, you create elegance without justification. When you design with value clarity, you create outcomes people will fund and support. TOGAF 10 encourages you to connect architecture decisions to value so that your roadmaps are not technical wish lists, they are investment plans with business impact. Now that you understand value, you can use value streams to see how value is produced across the enterprise. A value stream describes the end-to-end flow of activities that delivers a result to a customer or stakeholder, such as onboarding a customer, processing a claim, delivering energy services, or responding to an incident. Value streams cut across organizational silos, which is exactly why they are so useful. If you only look at organization charts, you miss the real flow of work and the real points of friction. When you map value streams, you identify where handoffs cause delay, where systems duplicate work, and where accountability is unclear. This is where enterprise architecture becomes practical, because you stop designing for departments and start designing for outcomes. With value streams visible, you can use them to prioritize architecture work in a way leaders respect. Instead of saying, we need to modernize this system, you can say, this value stream is failing because these steps are slow, risky, or duplicated. And here is where architecture changes will remove friction. This turns architecture into a targeted intervention rather than a broad transformation that scares stakeholders. Value streams also help you avoid the trap of funding disconnected projects. You can align multiple initiatives under the same value stream outcome, making it easier to sequence work, manage dependencies, and measure progress. In TOGAF 10 terms, value streams help you connect strategy and operating reality, which is exactly where enterprise architects add the most value. Now that you can see how value flows, you need capabilities to understand what the enterprise must be able to do. A capability is a stable ability of the enterprise, such as customer identity management, billing, supply chain planning, fraud detection, or incident response. Capabilities matter because they remain relatively stable, even when the organization restructures or technology changes. Leaders often change reporting lines and delivery methods, but the enterprise still needs the same capabilities to operate. When you use capabilities, you create a stable map that lets you plan change rationally, because you can invest in improving a capability rather than endlessly redesigning systems around organizational politics. TOGAF 10 treats capabilities as central to business architecture and to building roadmaps that survive organizational change. With capabilities defined, you must avoid confusing capabilities with processes, because this confusion causes poor architecture. A process is how work is currently done. A capability is what the enterprise needs to be able to do, regardless of how it is currently implemented. Processes change frequently as teams optimize, automate, or restructure. Capabilities are more stable, which makes them better for strategic planning and architecture roadmaps. When you anchor architecture on processes only, your roadmap becomes brittle and tied to today's operating model. When you anchor architecture on capabilities, your roadmap remains relevant as the enterprise evolves. This is a critical leadership advantage because it lets you design change that is resilient to organizational shifts. Now that you see why capabilities are powerful, you can use capability mapping to make complexity manageable. A capability map gives you a portfolio view of what the enterprise does, what is strong, what is weak, and where investment is needed. It also helps you govern change by clarifying who owns each capability and how success is measured. In real projects, capability maps help you stop funding technology projects that do not improve enterprise ability. They allow you to ask a hard question. Which capability are you improving, and how will we know it improved? This pushes delivery teams to connect their work to business outcomes and helps leaders make better prioritization decisions across competing programs. With value streams and capabilities together, you can apply them to a realistic example like customer onboarding. Your value stream might start with customer interest, move through identity verification, plan selection, contract signing, and activation, and end with a successful first bill and a satisfied customer. Along that value stream, capabilities might include customer data management, identity verification, pricing configuration, contract management, service activation, and customer communication. When onboarding is slow or error prone, you can identify whether the problem is capability weakness, such as poor identity verification, or value stream friction, such as manual handoffs between teams. Then you can design a target direction that improves capability maturity and simplifies the flow, rather than patching symptoms with one-off fixes. This is how TOGAF 10 concepts become practical. They let you diagnose the enterprise like a system, not like a set of disconnected projects. Now that you have seen the example, you can connect these concepts to how you build a roadmap leaders can execute. Enterprise boundaries define what is in scope for decisions and governance. Architecture defines the structure, decisions, and guardrails that guide change. Value streams show where outcomes are delivered and where friction blocks performance. Capabilities show what the enterprise must improve to deliver those outcomes reliably. When you use these together, you can define target architecture in a way that is meaningful, because it is anchored to capability uplift and value stream improvement, not just technology upgrades. Your roadmap becomes a sequence of work packages that improve specific capabilities and remove specific value stream friction points, which is how you deliver measurable outcomes over time. With the roadmap connection clear, you should avoid common pitfalls that weaken your credibility. One pitfall is treating value streams as a workshop output that never influences investment decisions. Another pitfall is making capability maps too detailed and academic, which prevents adoption. A third pitfall is using these concepts without ownership, which means nobody is accountable for improving a capability or fixing a value stream. TOGAF 10 works when you keep these concepts practical, tie them to decisions, and link them to governance. You are not doing mapping for the sake of mapping. You are creating a shared language that drives prioritization, funding, and accountable execution. Now that you know the pitfalls, you can use these concepts as a leadership tool in stakeholder conversations. When executives debate priorities, you can reframe the discussion around which value streams are most important and which capabilities are weakest. When technology teams debate solutions, you can anchor choices on what improves capability maturity and reduces value stream friction. When governance teams ask about compliance and risk, you can show how guardrails apply across capabilities and how controls protect value delivery. This reduces politics because you are using a neutral enterprise language rather than personal preferences. It also increases alignment because people can see the same enterprise model and agree on what matters most. Let's now discuss the key takeaways from what you learned so far so you can apply it immediately. You learned that TOGAF 10 core concepts are not academic definitions. They are the language that makes enterprise architecture actionable, governable, and defensible. You learned that the enterprise is the boundary of responsibility and decision making, and defining that boundary well prevents scope conflict and local optimization. You learned that architecture is about structure, decisions, and guardrails that guide change, not about producing diagrams. You learned that value must be explicit because leaders fund outcomes such as speed, resilience, cost reduction, compliance, and risk reduction. You learned that value streams show how value is delivered end to end across silos, which makes them a powerful tool for diagnosing friction and prioritizing change. You learned that capabilities describe stable enterprise abilities that survive reorganizations, which makes them ideal for strategic planning and roadmaps. Most importantly, you learned how these concepts work together to shape target architecture and roadmaps that improve real outcomes rather than producing theoretical models. Now that you have the core TOGAF 10 concepts of enterprise, architecture, value streams, and capabilities, you are ready to use them to make your architecture work practical, measurable, and respected. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your architecture and delivery peers, and comment with one value stream in your organization that you think needs the most improvement right now and why.